Well, you know what's funny is you're my second person I've went live with, so I'm still new to this. And like I don't know, I was in a weird rush today, and I want to use my computer, but I use my computer for a lot of like making beats and shit. So my phone seems better. It kind of scared me at first when it was kind of robot-y, but
Yeah.
but anyway, thank you for being on my show. I am Moke, and I'm here with Henry Binks.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a particularly cold day up here in Vermont. Tonight we're expecting the wind chill to bring temperatures down to minus 17 degrees.
But you're dressed like a cowgirl though.
But I'm dressed like it. Well, I'm not outside.
Oh yeah. Is it is it snowing there? You know what? You know what? Let me tell you something first. When you first hit me up and you canceled, I mean not canceled, but you said let's reschedule. I had already started just preparing like a show just for me. And so for your show, I was like, I'm not gonna smoke before. So the show for me, I started smoking, and then right when you hit me up, I was like halfway. So I'm pretty cooked right now. But is it snowing over there?
Yeah, I mean, off and on. We had like a late start to the winter for most of the season, temperatures have been hovering like either at freezing or right above, and it hadn't snowed, which I was okay with. Like, I don't fuck with winter usually.
Right.
It's when there's not a plague afoot this time of year, I'm all the way the fuck out of here.
But if you're getting negative whatever and it's not snowing, so it's just like just fucking just cold
Yeah, today it's just cold. Yeah.
with no snow.
Yep, no. There were like tiny little ice pellets coming from the sky for a second. It looked kind of like hail,
Yeah.
like a second, but
Huh.
yeah, I don't know. Climate change.
How is Vermont? Is it
Um, Vermont is, if you've ever read or watched The Lord of the Rings, I often compare Vermont to the Shire, because we have a lot of farmers, a lot of
mm,
ethnic communities, and
yeah.
a lot of really well fed old white people that like to gossip. Uh,
But I mean so that farming shit is like right up your alley though, because you in the islands you were a farmer.
yeah, yeah. So I've been practicing in agriculture, off and on for I guess maybe 6 years now.
Mm,
Um, yeah. So when I first came to Vermont, I was actually plugging in to kind of get started on my farming.
yeah.
This is where I got my foot in the door. I was on and off apprenticing under a particular farm in central Vermont, and yeah,
Do
yeah,
do you do you
yeah.
do you enjoy Vermont more than the islands?
No,
Really? Oh, okay. I actually enjoy Texas more than the islands.
I mean, I guess the grass is always greener, right? Maybe I pulled the trigger too fast on that one. It's
Mm,
I I adore Vermont in
yeah.
the summertime.
Yeah.
It's beautiful out here, and there's swimming holes all over.
Yeah.
There's a lot of forested area out here, so the woods are really nice during the warmer seasons. But the winters here are dark and cold and long, and I'm not.
Not a fan.
No.
Not a fan.
Yeah, so I guess the answer to your question kind of like depends on the time of year, if anything.
Makes sense. Yeah.
If it's winter, then I would be literally anywhere else if I could.
I bet it's like pretty out there, like in the summer and shit, spring.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely,
Yeah.
yep, and it's warm. Yeah, humid. It kind of reminds me of the South in a lot of ways. We get a lot of really, really humid heat. And you
But do
know,
y'all get do y'all get that 100-degree weather though?
not quite as bad. So
Yeah.
like South in the spring.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause I was gonna say, nigga, like this. Come on. But so I contacted you because I want to be educated on what exactly is a sex worker, and I have some questions. But answer that for me. What exactly is a sex worker?
Well, um, I guess there's no simple way to answer that question, funny enough, because sexuality is such a vast topic of interest.
Mm,
Well, everyone's got a taste for something, you know?
right.
A lot of people, when they hear the phrase sex worker, go straight to like the archetype of the prostitute.
That's where I went. Yes, that's
Right,
what I
right.
thought.
And so, yeah, so what I like to call that in the industry is like full service, so that means like, or full contact.
Right.
Depending on who you're talking to, and I'm still learning a lot of the more academic language myself.
Mm.
I've mostly just been a worker and not so much an advocate until this past year. So some of the language I use, it might not be totally accurate. Again, I'm coming from a place of learning myself, but a sex worker essentially is someone who conducts a service based on their clientele's erotic needs. And that could look like any number of things, people could be into food. They might say, Henry, I want you to sit on this cake and send me a video. We call that splashing. That is right.
So man, I'm not trying to be immature about this, but I'm just high.
Oh no,
I'm not.
hilarious. It's hilarious.
All right.
It's also,
Yeah.
it's also one of the funnier things I've done for money. But like, it could, I guess what I mean is like the industry of sex work is as vast as like like any other service industry.
Okay.
It's got a corner for everybody. Um,
Right.
so stripping, we would call sex work. Full service or prostitution, we would call sex work. Camming, selling nudes on OnlyFans. These are more popular varieties of sex work that we hear about. Dominant
Mm.
subbing, sugaring, all of that, all of that.
What is sugaring?
So sugaring is kind of like being a paid companion. Um,
Mm.
you see like on a lot of popular films that feature these kinds of relationships, you'll see like a wealthy old white dude with a piece of young arm candy.
Hmm.
That's one example of sugaring.
Okay.
It usually is like an economic relationship, kind of a arrangement between a financial provider
Yeah.
um, and and the sugar baby, right?
Okay.
That person's company would be sponsored. And again, because we're talking about an industry that's as vast as it is underground,
Hmm.
kind of has its own vague parameters too. It means it could be
Right.
different depending on the worker you're talking to and like what they
Right.
are too. Because we are talking about like intimacy and in
Right.
order,
Yeah.
yeah, and in order to, provide these services, people have to be like pretty in touch with like their own physical and emotional boundaries and that of their clients. So it's really like a case by case basis thing. But I hope that kind of sort of answered your question.
It does. So how did you get into that? But before I say how'd you get into that,
Yeah.
what exactly do you do?
Yeah. Um so I am a second generation sex worker. That means that one of my parents was in the industry. My mother was a worker. The slang term lot lizard would be applicable for
Is
her.
that like at truck stops or some shit?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was kind of a traveling act of sorts.
So when they do that, do they like hitch rides and just catch it to the like they don't have a home or I mean obviously she would have a home because she had a daughter.
Well, I was actually conceived in an act of prostitution.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very much
So
in the
she was going that hard when she was just like, yo, I'm 9 months and I'm just gonna still be out here doing that.
no, my mom had like a client, a client provider relationship with my father.
Hmm.
But the emotional parameters of that got complicated. Some feelings were developed, and then so was I. So when
Wait. So your dad was just a John?
he was just a client.
So it
Yeah,
was like, so I mean, not to say this is fucked up, but it was an accident, I guess.
it was totally an accident. I was totally an accident. Yeah. Yeah. But when, my mother found out that she was pregnant with me, they decided to get married in Reno, a lot
Wow.
of lifetime, television from.
But was she still doing it though?
Um, that part's unclear. So I didn't actually find out until my about my mom's history in sex work until after she passed away. She
Sorry.
keep that part of her life like very
Mm,
much under wraps.
okay.
While I was growing up with her, she kind of converted to Catholic. She struggled with like a lot of substance abuse, and we're talking about like a generation that was living at a time where feminine sexuality and just like sexuality in general was a lot more censored. Only
Right.
thing. The phrase sex work probably wasn't being used as often. She didn't have the kind of like support network. It wasn't a
Wait,
norm.
wait. You said they went to Reno,
Yeah, they got married in Reno.
but isn't that legal there?
Sex work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, yeah,
Oh,
it is.
but so
I'm
but
not
but
sure.
once they found out that she was pregnant, then they were just like, "Yo, we should." She's pretty much said she's gonna stop, and they got together and right. If I'm
From what I
following
understand,
correct, okay.
yeah.
All right.
Again, a lot of the history has eluded me, and I guess will remain a mystery. But from what I understand, yeah, that's the story. So they got married. They were together for a few years before they separated, and my mom subsequently took baby Henry
Yeah.
up to Alaska and raised me there.
I
Uh,
like. Wow. How was that?
it was cold. It's you know,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, it was cold.
Did,
Um, it
does it stay like dark there for a couple days, or is that light?
That's much farther north in Alaska. That's
Oh,
like
okay.
yeah. So I'm from the southeast area of Alaska, the capital city, Juneau. And there it does get like pretty dark in the wintertime, but we do see the sun during daylight hours. The sun will set at about 4 o'clock.
Mm,
So,
okay.
like going to school and going to work, you might not actually get to see the sun during the
Damn.
winter, but it's not because it doesn't show up. You have to go all
Right.
the way to Barrow for that. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
But to answer your question as to like what I do, as far as the
Wait,
sort of
wait, but wait. I'm sorry.
no,
Before
it's
you
okay.
say what do you do, what made you want to get into that industry? It's an industry? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Okay. What made you want to get into that industry?
Oh, well, I got my foot in the door when I was 22, something like that. Um, I was traveling the country at the time.
Mm.
I had taken a summer to hop freight trains and I got tired of that. Decided to settle in New Mexico, and a friend of mine who was working at one of the strip clubs there told me that there was an amateur night being held, and there was going to be a cash prize of $200. And I'd just gotten off the road. I was flat fucking broke. $200 sounded really good, you
Right,
know.
yeah.
So she lent me a pair of pleasers, those big platform heels that you see the dancers in, and
Hmm.
I found my finest pair of underpants, and I enrolled in the competition. I did not get first place, but I got second and was offered a job dancing. And so that
Nice.
got my foot in the door. It wasn't really something that I had like a long-standing intention of doing.
Right.
It was never something that weirded me out. It was never something that I was politically opposed to, but
Mm.
it wasn't but all the same it wasn't something that I had this like long-standing curiosity about either. It was more just like circumstance that brought
Right.
me into that career. So I started dancing. um it turned out that while I'm not a shredmeister on the pole by any means, I'm just not. I've never been one of those dancers. I'm a fucking
Yeah.
charmer. I'm too buxom for that. But I was really good with the people, and I was really good at making them feel safe. I was good at making them feel wanted. I was good at
Mm.
making them feel sexy, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. So I kept dancing for a few years. But as I got older and, continually reestablished my place of dwelling, which I tend to do,
Yeah.
living down in New Orleans, up here in Vermont, down on the islands, my service started to kind of change and open up a little more. So what I do now is much like many other dancers who are without a club to work at, I create content on OnlyFans with a colleague of mine, and I do a few other things. But we're gonna leave those details out in the ether.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I mostly will just say I dance and I provide services surrounding kink, emotional companionship, and good old fashioned pornography. Uh,
In person or video?
well, so that question, I think I'm going to exercise. I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I was only asking because I was
yeah.
just wondering how that would be now with COVID. Because I think now it's like not only do you have to worry about like sexual protection, but now you have to worry about fucking life protection.
Okay, so I can touch on that, and I'm not going, because we don't live in a society where my form of labor and the industry that I'm speaking of that so many people are a part of, because we don't live in a society where our people are protected, much less safe from the hands of the law.
Yeah.
uh, I can't speak on any one person's experience, but what I will say is what we've seen in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic is entire scores of workers, whether they're, dancers, dominatrixes, sugar babies, et cetera, no matter what, if it involves person to person contact, we're seeing a lot of people kind of running up against a saturated online market. Everybody and their mom is on OnlyFans. And while I
Right.
love like this kind of sexual revolution that's going on, being birthed from an economic crisis, kind of forcing us
Right.
to talk about sex work and normalize it. While I love that, I will say that like a lot of long standing sex workers have been pretty hard up in the wake of COVID, because a lot of what we do relies so much on our ability to connect with people,
Right.
and especially for dancers and in-person providers, it relies so much on our body language, our eye contact, our ability to be really intimate with our clientele. With OnlyFans and online content, there's only so much of that we can kind of give to our
Yeah.
there's obviously, even between you and I, this is about as close as we can get with our clientele.
Right. Okay.
A lot of that, so I would say that like for a lot of people, COVID's really changed the industry and made, of course, we're not the only tradespeople out there who are on hard times due to this unfortunate global health crisis. There
No,
there are
okay.
a lot of people
Let
out
me
of.
let me let me ask you this though. So if you're in that industry, why wouldn't you go to like Portland where there's like mass strip clubs or Nevada where it's legal? Or even like fucking I don't know, like Taiwan or some shit. You know what I mean? Take it
Yeah,
international.
right, I know. Those are some dreams of mine. Again, COVID put well, a couple
Right.
couple things have kind of made the adult industry kind of harder to exist in. One condition being a bill called FOSTA SESTA. This is a bill that was passed back in 2018, I think, and what it was a mass censorship bill, um,
Mm,
hidden behind the veil of an anti-trafficking bill. What this did is it down websites like Backpage. It's
right.
shut, it created like mass censorship algorithms that make it so that when we promote ourselves on Instagram, we get shadow banned. It
What's
shut
shadow
down.
ban?
Shadow ban means that like if you use a hashtag, right? People
Hmm.
people can search a hashtag on Instagram.
Right.
A series of images will pop up. Shadow banning makes it so that your hashtags are virtually ineffective.
Hmm.
Um, I think that it carries a little bit further than that, but I actually haven't had the privilege of being shadow banned yet. I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm ready. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But I haven't had the pleasure of being put in the corner yet. Yeah, so what we saw with FOSTA SESTA was like a mass deletion of online
Mm,
services for sex workers across the country, right?
okay.
Not just for sex workers to find clients, but to keep each other safe. There were forums there where sex workers were able to talk about bad date experiences they've had. There were resources where people could talk about clubs with poor management, poor security,
And
etc.
they took that type of stuff off?
All of it, everything indiscriminately. There were even anti-trafficking websites that had fuck all to do with, networking sex workers
Yeah.
that faced the same kind of censorship that sex workers working independently on these platforms
Now, let
experienced
me.
just because of these algorithms and these blanket statements and policies. They were just blindly thrown out to the internet, and they put a lot
Mhm.
of people out of work. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Damn.
Well, I mean, it's okay. It's not okay. There's a bill that is, for all intents and purposes, what they call it when a bill is kind of put on pause or has been taken off the table, in the name of
Mhm.
priority, is that we call it a dead bill. But there was a bill recently that was on the table with Congress that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were involved with, that was actually to study the harmful effects of this bill, FOSTA SESTA.
Well, like Bernie always looking out for the people, man.
I mean, sometimes, but he signed FOSTA SESTA, so he was more
He wasn't educated yet. He got
he,
educated afterwards.
correct. So the sex worker community kind of came after him, and Elizabeth Warren had also signed this bill, and our community kind of came to them, and we were like, "Hey, just throwing this out there, but this bill's actually made it harder for your anti-trafficking task force to track down
Hmm.
traffickers because they're using out of country IP addresses. They're out of our
Right.
jurisdiction now.
Yeah.
Made it harder, for us in the States to protect each other. We can't check in on
Mm.
each other. You've put a lot of people in danger with this." And they went, "Oh, well, yeah, when you put it that way, maybe we should start talking about that." So we're in the beginning stages of hopefully reversing this terrible bill, and, making the internet a safe place to be an
Yeah.
independent worker again. But there's no promises. Of course, we're coming out of a 4-year chapter of just unapologetically fascist bullshit. So we have a lot of work ahead of us.
What type? If you do if sex sex working, if it was like super legal, how would doing taxes be?
Well, so I myself am not for the legalization of sex work. I'm for the decriminalization.
Why
And
not for the legal?
so, I guess the best example I could give to you, and again, I'm still coming from a place of learning how to use all this
Yeah.
language. I've only been advocating for about a year. But the best example I could bring is if we look at like the weed industry, right?
Hmm.
Independent growers in California, before weed was legalized, were able to make decent money and were able to pay laborers decent wage.
Right.
When the federal government came and saturated the market and inserted all kinds of bylaws and red tape, making those independent growers illegal unless they signed X amount of paperwork, paid fees, et cetera,
Yeah.
not only did the market get flooded by more corporate enterprises of agriculture, which is not good in any way. Corporate mass produced anything is all
Hmm.
about ethics. So not only did we see a saturated market, so these independent, long-standing farmers were suffering, but we saw a lot of those independent, long-standing farmers kind of disappear, and we saw the
Yeah.
treatment. And I'm not saying that the green industry in California or anywhere is without its problems. There's a lot of exploitation in every labor movement in the United States and across
Mm.
the planet. We do not treat our workers well on any platform. So that's not
True.
to say that the weed industry was like perfect. It wasn't. It was
Right.
right, but getting the federal government involved in the decision making process of what it means to produce and distribute those goods when these farmers had been doing it one way all along, basically
I got you. I
Yeah,
got you saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
back in the process, and it took the decision making power out of the producer's hands. So when we talk about decriminalizing sex work, we could easily just look at it, the same way. If we decriminalize, that means that workers are still able to set their own prices, set their own boundaries, set their own hours. Work is even private contractors. When you walk into a strip club and you say, I want a job, I want to show my butthole to that guy for a buck when I'm on stage, the manager hands you a contract, basically calling you an independent contractor. And that's what you file
Yeah.
yourself as.
But with weed though, decriminalized, I know in West Texas, it was decriminalized and I got caught with weed, but I got a ticket but didn't go to jail because it was under an ounce. So if it's decriminalized, wouldn't there have to be some type of like they can't be like, yo, you can't have like a fucking orgy or that, you know what I'm saying?
Right. So yeah. So again, I'm still learning. Oopsie, the ins and outs of the bureaucracy surrounding these laws and how they happen.
Right.
Um, so I'm gonna fudge some of this, and I
All
apologize
right.
in
That's all
advance.
good.
But from what I understand, when we talk about decriminalizing, all that means is like making sure that we don't incarcerate people, and making sure that we do have independent resources like available to us for harm reduction,
Right.
and for our protection. Kind of like when we talk about countries in Europe decriminalizing the use of narcotics. Like what we saw was a lower rate of overdose. What we saw was a lower rate of drug related
Yeah.
violence. We saw a lower rate, obviously, of incarceration because it was just a ticketable offense. And we
Yeah.
saw harm reduction work by just giving people the space, to utilize their autonomy and use
Right.
their bodies as they will in a safe place. Right? Decriminalizing basically just takes the what it does. I mean, it does a lot of things. It changes the danger zone quite a bit. But if we
Right.
were to decriminalize sex work tomorrow, we would see less people of color going to jail and being sexually assaulted by police officers, who are protected under those acts of sexual assault. In I
Damn.
think it is, I can't remember the number of states, but there are many, many states that will protect an officer of the law who commits a sexual act with a sex worker in the name of an investigation and thereafter arrests them.
Wait. What?
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is a cop on
Can be
paper,
undercover and fuck a girl and be like it was
correct, fuck or rape. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
So when we
wow.
decriminalize sex work, we take away laws like that, which
So that
means that
means then they'll be charged then.
it means that if it could very well possibly mean it would open up the discussion of like more closely examining the conduct of officers of the law when they're on these sting operations and these anti-trafficking operations. It means that we would have room to pay closer attention to their conduct. It means that we would be talking about it more, and hopefully that it would stop happening
Let me
ultimately.
let me ask you this. And this is I guess just a general question. So somebody say who's a sex worker, how do you get out of that thin line of sex worker and then like sex trafficking?
Well,
Because I'm pretty sure you can fall into that like easy. I mean, I don't know. I would think.
under under the anti-trafficking laws as they stand right now, even yeah, you can be charged with trafficking. Let's say I have an appointment with a client, right? And
Mm,
let's say I'm not even engaging in a full act of prostitution the way most people would think about it, right? Let's
right.
say he wants me to come over and like clean his house in my underpants, right? And I ask you to drive me there.
Hmm.
Let's
I'm
say that,
trafficking you.
yeah, if we got pulled over and whatever, and whatever officer responsible for that traffic stop, caught wind of what we were
Hmm.
doing, we could both go to jail for trafficking.
Damn.
Yeah.
So okay, so what makes it the difference of I guess being a solo sex worker and having a pimp?
Well, having a pimp mostly.
I mean, yeah, I know that, but I mean, but is it still the same thing?
No, not at all. And a large part of my work through the collective that I run here in Vermont, a large part of our work in the past year is discussing that exact difference. I mean, first and foremost, the biggest difference is consent. And whether or not there's an abuse of any kind present. So I myself am an independent sex worker. I don't have anybody that I answer to. I
Mm,
do it of my own volition. I make my own hours, et cetera, et cetera. When we talk about you know power dynamics when it comes to sex work, pimps and stuff like that. That's kind of it's a hairy subject because it's not uncommon that we see these pimp roles being like romantic partners, maybe
right.
family members, friends, drug dealers. It's
Yeah.
not it's not it's not always chalked up to like Hollywood's variety of what a pimp and prostitute relationship looks like. It could
Hmm.
just be a high functioning abusive relationship between you know, between a more dominant party and said sex worker. It could be,
Kind of like Hustle and Flow. Have you seen that movie?
yeah, kind of like
Yeah.
sort of, yeah, yeah. And then it. I mean, and other times they are more traditional, or more archetypal power models. I mean,
Hmm.
we see worker exploitation, and while we're not going to call it pimping because it's not exactly the same thing at all, we see
Right.
worker exploitation in the sex industry in many strip clubs across the United States. Regardless, the charging
Yeah.
of house fees, the bribing of security officers so that things can go down in the VIP that are not okay. You
Right.
know, I have so many horror stories.
Would you like to share one?
Sure. So the last time that I danced at a club, I was in New Mexico just coming back from St. Croix where I met you.
Hmm.
And I had never been to this club before. I auditioned. They said, you know, that'll do, pig, go get changed. And
Yeah.
I was there maybe a half hour, and I got pulled over to a table by a group of gentlemen. One of them had told me he was a Marine. So he pulled me into his lap, and I asked him if he wanted to dance, and he gave me a very common response. It's very eye roll. And whoever listens to this podcast, if you go to a strip club, if strip clubs are ever a thing, again, don't do this. Serious, don't fucking do this. He told me, oh, I'm not going to pay for a dance, but if you come back to my hotel, I'll pay you X amount of dollars. Da 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 da. I'm rolling in it. And I said, that's nice. That's not what I'm here for. You can pay me now, and we can go over to that couch
Yeah.
and I can do my job, right? He got a little forceful. So by the end of the encounter, I had been informed by him that if I had left with him, he would have treated me like a princess, bought me anything I wanted, but that he had a hot temper and he wasn't afraid to hit a woman.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was like,
He
that was
told
the
you this
start
in
of
the
it.
club?
He told me this in the club. Yeah, yeah. And so I went to get up and go, and he had a stack of money in his breast pocket. So I took a handful of it,
Mm.
and he grabbed my hand, and he grabbed my other hand, and he pinned both hands on either side of the couch. So
Where's security?
they were friends with him.
Yikes.
So I walked out of that club, and I never went back. I didn't pay house fees. I gave everybody there the middle finger.
Was this white people?
Yeah.
It sounds white. That's fucked up. Like,
Yeah.
okay, but so when I met you in
Uh-huh.
St. Croix, how
Mm-hmm.
come you weren't like advocate about it? Like, because when I just thought you were a fucking farmer.
Oh well, I've been doing both almost the entire time that I've been doing both. I guess that makes no
Yeah.
sense. I basically, um, I started
Did
sex work a year before I started farming. The reason I wasn't engaging in sex work in St. Croix was because I didn't have like a big security net there. I
yeah,
didn't
because that
really,
shit out there.
yeah, yeah, there's, yeah, yep. I'm sure you remember the brothels on the west side. Now, I will say I
Yeah,
met some of the workers that were out of that brothel, and they were amazing fucking people.
yeah.
They were incredible people.
Were they Dominican, most of them?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I was working at a coffee shop near the end of my stay on St. Croix, and one of my regulars was a working girl who would bring her clients in, and I speak a little bit of Spanish, so she'd come to the counter and they'd order drinks, and she would talk shit to me about her clients in Spanish while they sat
yeah,
on. They were, you know, the relief workers and like the
yeah,
electrician
yeah,
workers coming in from like Arkansas and Mississippi and shit, you know.
yeah.
So they're, you know, they were perfectly fine not knowing whatever she was saying, and we were
Hmm.
perfectly fine kind of roasting them while they weren't listening. It was good. It was a good time.
So are they there by choice or is that trafficking?
Well, I
Because I'm
know.
pretty sure that some of them probably don't have like the citizenship to be over there.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, in my opinion, border crossing, whether you have the paperwork or not, is the more irrelevant part of the equation. I do know that around the Virgin Islands there is sort of a pipeline from community to community, not just involving sexual labor, but other forms of labor as well. But again, that's something that we see in the United States now,
Right.
or like the mainland of the United States, rather.
Yeah.
That isn't to say that there's a great deal of sex trafficking that occurs in the States. Most trafficking that we see in the United States is agricultural or service related. Um, yeah, and it's never, and so what's funny about like this whole, when we talk about trafficking, right? The
Yeah.
narrative that we're always fed is like protecting our young pretty white girls, right? That's like
Yeah.
a tale as old as time. It dates back to 1910, something called the Mann Act. So the Mann Act was the United States' first like kind of prohibition-y anti-trafficking bill, and what it was basically, it was kind of following in the foot, it was kind of in the same vein of the propaganda you saw in Birth of a Nation. You know, you
Mm,
saw
yeah.
this like super predator black dude and this, you know, swooning white young angel being accosted, and
Yeah.
assaulted and you know, and defiled. 1910, the Mann Act was the paperwork version of that. What
Mm,
it was
okay.
designed to do
Mm,
was to actively discourage interracial relationships.
mm.
But up
How
until
so?
it was, so the answer, what it, how so? Okay. The propaganda, as I recall, man, I wish we have a comedian slash historian who's spoken at a couple of my nonprofits events, who's way better at talking about this stuff than I am. Um, but I guess we could boil it down to, as much as I can remember, a lot of it was just the propaganda around the bill. The scare
Mm,
tactic of saying, you know, we have to keep our virginal white women safe. And the only way we can do that is to like discourage independent acts of sexuality and interracial marriage.
gotcha.
It wasn't to say that the Mann Act specifically said like thou shalt not marry a black man. It was more over the propaganda around it. You can find documents online about the Mann Act and
Yeah.
and the kind of economic shift and the birth of the nuclear family that came after. Because before
Hmm.
the Mann Act, what you saw was women brothel owners and prostitutes, right, building the infrastructure of the West as we know it today, all those railroad towns, you know, all those like mining
Hmm.
towns.
Yeah.
A lot of that was built on the backs, between the thighs or butt cheeks, whatever, of sex workers, of
Right.
sex workers.
Okay.
The first, as I recall it, one of the first schools in Seattle was constructed by a sex worker, financed by a sex worker.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
So
a lot of these women, you know, ended up kind of building the wealth and the beginnings of like society on the West Coast as we know it today. They were humanitarians. They worked in
yeah.
disaster relief. They were like they were civic servants. They were community members. And then 1910 came around, and prohibition came around. You know, around the same time that we saw the prohibition of alcohol. And that drove the independent woman archetype all the way underground. And
Mm,
the nuclear family was born.
yeah.
Suddenly, bitches needed husbands.
Now let me okay. So and man, I'm just gonna be blunt asking shit because I don't want to sound bad, but
No, go for
how,
it.
how why do you think your mom didn't want to tell you? And who and then after that, who told you that your mom was that, a sex worker?
Totally. So my mother, again, she I think that part of her life really isolated her because,
Mhm.
again, she was alive during a different time where conversations like this
True.
couldn't really
Yeah.
happen in the open.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there wasn't a whole lot of support for her and like the trauma that she experienced working in the industry. There wasn't a whole lot of support just kind of processing the fact that she'd done it in the first place. And it certainly wasn't, something that she could bring up to me as a young child. I mean, we like even now with sex work being more part of the conversation in a way that it hasn't been, workers are still getting their kids taken away. That's the bottom line. It is still something that is so vehemently frowned upon that a lot of workers don't feel safe being out in the first place. Now, I don't have kids and
If you had kids, would you let them know?
absolutely.
You would
Absolutely.
like how would you tell them? Like if
That
if
part
like
that
if
part
your
I
if
don't
your
know.
daughter or your son was like, "What do
Mom,
you
what do you do
do?"
for work?
Yeah. Or even yet, what if you had a younger daughter and who was like, "Mom, I want to be a sex worker."
I would be I mean it depends, on her age. I think first and foremost, like depending on how old they were, when the first
Right.
conversation was had, the language I would use would be really different. I think,
Right.
like if I were dealing with like a really young kid, like in the single digits, I would probably say that, I work in the community to help make people feel better. And I would keep it at that. Or something benign like that. Um, and again, I mean, I envision a world where the adult industry is allowed to exist, where
Right.
I'm allowed to exist, where I'm allowed to do the work that I do and that I care about, and also raise kids, or like have a partner, or all of these things that like the stigma really challenges for us.
Yeah.
Uh, I envision a world where that is possible, and a lot of the advocacy work that I do is geared towards making that dream come true. Not just for me, but all of my other siblings in the industry. It's
Right.
important that one day we're not, driven so far underground that we just disappear and no one blinks an eye. But sorry, I'm having camera trouble.
No, you're good.
Um,
And who told you about your mom?
sorry.
Who told you about your mom?
My mom, I was told about her by my sister. Um, I have four sisters, two from my mother's side and two from my father's. They both got around.
Are you the oldest or
I'm the youngest. I'm the
okay?
baby. Yeah.
So were your sisters conceived out of work also?
That part is unclear. I know that my mother was engaged. So my mother was from Australia. And then
Oh
she,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and she ran into some complications while she was there, so she kind of fled to the United States. I don't really, again, a lot of these details elude us. She took some
Yeah.
secrets to the grave, but I know that she was active in the industry while she was in Australia. At
Yo,
least,
y'all should really like try to do some like ancestry.com shit. Like it might be pretty interesting.
yeah, I know.
For
A
real.
part of me is afraid of it. I'm like, I wonder, like,
But what are you scared of?
I don't know, like, what if, my, what if I have some ties back to
Like
like
Hitler or something?
fucking yeah, like some famous SS officer,
Yeah.
you know, just what if I'm related to a dirtbag? I
I
mean,
mean, it adds to your story.
Yeah,
right? Like if
that's
you're related to a dirtbag, and now you're bringing awareness. And now speaking of awareness, that website you gave me that's at the bottom of the screen, if anybody wants to see, how do you pronounce that?
okay. So that's ishtarcollective.org. Last year, um, an individual came up to Vermont from New York to help push the decriminalization bills that were on the table here in Vermont last year.
Mm.
Those bills are H568 and H569. One's a Good Samaritan bill, providing a certain level of legal immunity should someone witness or be a victim to a violent crime while engaging in prostitution. So that would mean that if I were out hooking and
Is that what they
my,
call it? Hooking?
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just trying to be cute.
Hooking.
So let's say I'm out there working
Yeah.
and I see someone steal a car, or even worse, my client attacks me.
Right.
Um, Most sex workers aren't going to call the cops for obvious reasons, right?
Right.
I mean, and for me, beyond that, I think cops are more dangerous than most people in the first place.
Correct.
But
Yes.
if I were a cop calling kind of person, which I am not,
Mhm.
but if I were, and something happened to me while I was engaging in an act of prostitution, this immunity bill, H568, would allow me to safely call the authorities without fear of prosecution, without risk
Yeah.
of prosecution to a certain degree. And then the
What?
second bill,
Wouldn't that be some whole shit? Like you see a crime and you call the cops, and then like both of y'all niggas go to jail.
then you have to sit in the back of the fucking squad car
Yeah.
with that asshole.
Oh,
Are you
that'd be
kidding me?
fun.
Oh, I know, but the thing is like that's the reality that we look at
Right.
while sex work is criminalized, which is you know why we're not protected, which is like why this there's the why the stigma feeds the dialogue of it being a dangerous enterprise. It's dangerous because we have failed in
Mm.
supporting our laborers. If we protected our workers,
Mm.
these things would not happen as much. It's not because I decided one day that I was going to put a kick me sign on my bag.
Yeah.
I could walk down the street in a fucking garbage bag and I would still get catcalled.
Yeah. 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 Niggas will catcall any and everything.
Anything, right?
Yeah.
Anything. So, when we hear that, when we hear in conversations, oh, sex work is dangerous, or you hear almost like this victim blaming dialogue of, oh, well, you wouldn't get sexually assaulted, or you wouldn't have been attacked, or you would have gone to jail, da 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 da, if you weren't a sex worker. We're not
Right.
only playing into like this victim blaming dialogue where we're saying, you deserved it.
Right. Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
also kind of saying, well, maybe if you didn't wear that, or maybe if you just weren't asking, maybe if you didn't just act that way, maybe if you like, maybe if you were not doing something sex involved, sex oriented, we're basically saying, your fault, you asked for it. But what this Good Samaritan bill would have provided had it passed last year was
So
that
it
little
it
bit of,
didn't pass.
well, COVID hit. And
Oh, okay. So
yeah,
they never got that. Okay.
yeah, it never got that far. We are going to try to put it back on the table this year with a full decriminalized bill for the state of
Mm.
Vermont, which I'm really excited about. Which is kind of like why Ishtar Collective came together. This bill showed up, and we wanted to make sure that sex workers were part of the conversation, and
Yeah.
not just a bunch of crunchy old dudes who've probably never been involved in the industry as a worker. We
Right.
wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that we had like educated decisions being made on our behalf. Because how many times do we see bills get pushed and pulled, and they affect entire demographics that are not in the room for that decision?
Yeah.
How many times do we see that in our government? How many, like, in our communities, in our policing, the things that are illegal that shouldn't be? Poverty is illegal, victimless crimes, people being
Yeah.
incarcerated for marijuana possession, people being denied the ability to acquire a driver's license later in their life for an unpaid ticket a few years prior. Poverty, all
That
of
shit
these
happened to
states.
me. That's why I got a Virgin Islands license, and then I paid it off. But yeah, I
Yeah.
feel you.
Yeah, and that's a real, that's a real thing. We wanted to make sure that if this bill was being passed, that our best interests were actually being held in mind.
Right.
Because that doesn't happen for people all the time.
Hmm.
It doesn't happen often. Yeah, so we put together this nonprofit. A lot of our energy in 2020 was going towards making sure people in the community who needed extra financial assistance, during the first wave of COVID had it. So in June, we had a big Stream Fest kind of coming out event where we let Vermont know, like, hey, we're here,
Right.
we're a sex work organization, and we raised money to funnel back into underprivileged families in the community, mainly sex workers, because
Right.
with the first stimulus relief package, there was a clause basically saying that if you were a sex worker in
I
any
was
way at
just
all,
about to ask, do
you
sex
were
workers
not
get
going to, yeah,
stimulus?
you were not going to receive financial
So so
assistance.
so 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 that means even if you're just a stripper, wow, or a porn star. I mean, damn.
Or if you're undocumented, a lot of
Mm,
like, we're not just, the thing is like entire communities just flew under the radar during
damn.
the first wave of COVID. And they're still, I mean, we're, the economic crisis we are in right now. Do you remember the housing crash and the economic crash in 2008?
No, I mean, oh yeah, I do, I do.
That pales in comparison to what we're dealing with as a country right now, and globally. The economic crisis that we are dealing with presently is very much likened to the Great Depression, and that's what we're dealing with.
Mm,
And meanwhile, we have entire communities that are not being supported by the government because of red tape, for no other fucking reason except for,
yeah.
racist politics, moral high grounds that don't exist, and lots of red tape. So our organization kind of got in the mud when this kind of came to our attention, and when it was
Mm,
impossible for us to pass these bills on the legislature. We went straight to crisis control, and we were able to raise $5,000 during that event, and all of it went back
nice.
into the community.
Yeah.
And that, in a grand scheme, that's not much, right? We're only talking, we're talking about a really
It's
small
still
space,
something though.
but it's something,
Right,
and I think
yeah.
that's what's been really cool about working with everybody at the collective, is like, while we are still in the beginning stages, you know, um, we're still establishing ourselves. We're still very much a fledgling organization. Everyone I have the pleasure of working with, has such vision and drive and like big picture focus, and
Yeah.
they have the endurance to make these small changes and take these tiny steps, and move through the bullshit to
Hmm.
get to the big stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So our first year was crazy. Definitely, the pandemic shaped a lot of what it ended up looking like, but we got a lot of cool stuff done.
How do y'all go about raising money? Like,
So
do y'all sell like merchandise, or y'all just
so
be like, this is a cost?
we're gonna be looking into options like that, in this next year. A lot of our fundraising, the first year, was community and donor funded, and again,
Hmm.
all like, the majority of those funds went back into the community. If they didn't go to the community, they went towards resources like information we could give to our lobbyists and our local state figureheads. It
Yeah.
went towards, simple networking tools like business cards. It went towards gas so we could have a teach-in up in Burlington, during an
Yeah.
anti-police brutality encampment, this past summer. We did a
Mm.
really big teach-in on, the intersectionality between sex work and systemic racism. It was a really neat teach-in, but a lot of our funds have come from community donors, people who have participated in that first Stream Fest, and then grants.
Are
Lots and lots of
community
grants.
community donors, is that like what, John's, or is that what you mean? Or
No,
like
no, no, no.
people
I mean, maybe.
uh
I mean, maybe, but I don't ask.
all right, that's
Yeah, yeah, just like-minded people that also think that labor rights extend to the adult industry.
So okay, so here's was my thought process because at first I thought you were for the cause of making sex work legal, and then I was thinking if that was to happen, would it be like in the islands how people how they would get like a food handler's license? You know what I mean? Because I figured that you would have to go through some type of thing,
Right.
and then I'm no offense, but I'm also shocked that like your mom was having unprotected sex with Johns.
I mean, I know, me too. Me
like,
too. I mean,
but I mean,
but
go ahead.
there's a responsible there are responsible ways to conduct yourself around sex work. It's not
Right,
impossible. Again, it's all a matter of like providing protection for your
and
laborers.
and they probably had history and stuff, so they probably knew each other.
Yeah, he
So
was a regular. They'd seen each other a few times before. Yeah,
yeah,
it was just a magic moment, I guess.
yeah. So
Uh,
okay,
yeah.
so you got into it by stripping,
Hmm.
but at what point were you like this is because I mean I don't want to say that you want to say that this is my career, but like this is something that I like. Obviously, you have to be a very sexual person to enjoy said job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, but you also don't have to like enjoy your job to do it. There's sex workers who are just in it, you know, temporarily. There's sex workers that hate their jobs. There are, believe it or not, there are sex workers who are asexual. Um, they just
Who
have a
what?
talent. They just have a talent, asexual.
Hmm.
Yeah, there.
Do you
I
know?
mean,
Do you know a lot of guys that are male sex workers?
do I know a lot of guys that are sex workers? I know a few actually, and in Vermont, statistically, most of our arrests, and I don't know if it's this statistic is contained within like 1 year or if it's in like the entire state's history.
Hmm.
But most of Vermont's prostitution related arrests, at least on paperwork, were cisgendered male.
Hmm.
That isn't to say that the authorities involved in those arrests were actively looking over, the defendant's gender identity versus
Hmm.
their assigned gender. They could have been non-binary, they could have been trans. We don't have access to data to verify whether or not that's true,
Hmm.
right? But the sweeping majority of arrests in Vermont made in regards to prostitution were apparently cisgendered male. Yeah. So I do know people across the gender spectrum that are involved in the industry, and it's, I mean, this past year has been really surprising because I've been in Vermont for a few years now, and basically the whole time I've been here, I thought like I'm I guess I'm the only stripper here. Guess I'm the
Yeah.
only, I wasn't like really out about it because we're a homogenized white fucking state.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a wonderful community. I love this state, but we are the second whitest state in the country. Okay, like
Vermont seems like it'd be boring.
it. Yes, yes. But boring's good every once in a while. It's a good place
Yeah,
to
of
get.
course. Yeah.
It's good. It's good. It's a good place to ride out a pandemic. I'll tell you that much.
Probably.
Yeah, we're doing okay over here. Comparatively, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people across the gender spectrum who are involved in sex work. And while I didn't, for the first number of years that I was in Vermont, of course, I didn't know there were other sex workers in the state,
Yeah.
not actively, you know what I mean? But I mean, like, I knew there had to be like somebody, but I didn't think I
Mm.
was ever going to meet them, you know?
Are you are you actively dating anybody?
Am I actively dating anyone right now?
Yeah.
No, no. I had a long-term relationship that ended very suddenly last October. And so since then, I've been taking a lot more time to just kind of like focus on my career with the nonprofit, to do more work in the industry and and just ride out the pandemic and not stress myself out trying to fucking date somebody.
But when you were dating somebody, how does that? They have to, I guess, be a very. They have to trust you. Like, do you tell them? Like, how does that go? How's that conversation
Oh
go?
yeah, every time. Yep. For me, a lot of the times it's like a pre-existing condition. It's not something that's like the fact of the matter isn't super negotiable. So if I'm seeing
Mm.
somebody and I've been on a couple dates with them and I'm like, hey, by the way, I'm a sex worker, and they go, ugh, I'm like, bye.
Yeah,
That's it. That's it. I'm not going to see you.
yeah,
Yeah, because that's like, if there's a part of my character that you just intrinsically disagree with, then we have nothing to talk about. Because it's not something that I lose sleep over at night. It's not something that I think it's not something that I view inside myself that needs to be fixed or
right,
gotten rid of it all. It's a part of who I am.
right. But so they have to be secure as fuck.
Maybe. I mean, depending, like, yeah, ideally, because I don't like, I think I've had quite enough of babysitting like grown men. They're not
Right.
the only people I date. But the sweeping majority, it's a weird bisexual thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of jokes in the queer community about how if you're bisexual, the lesbians don't think you're gay enough, and like the
But
straights are kind of scared that you're gonna be
I feel
like.
like dating a woman would be like she would understand that more versus like a nigga. You know what I'm saying? And I guess it would also depend on what type of sex work you do.
Well, right, and that's changed a lot over the years. I will say in my last relationship, he, my ex partner was involved with the organization that I run today. We we had engaged in we'd made content together. All in all, he was pretty down. There were kinds of work that I typically do as a singular entity that the negotiations around that kind of work were just too complicated.
Hmm.
So I didn't engage in that kind of work while we were
Yeah.
together. That is not to say that that's like, the Bible for sex work and dating. Everybody's relationship
Right.
boundaries
Yeah.
are
It's
different,
different.
but for me, I kind of looked at this relationship and I looked at this like avenue of sex work that wasn't super available to me at the time anyway because Vermont.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I just kind of like I I felt as though it was unrealistic to try to negotiate the difference between the two, and one of them had to go, um,
Mm.
or just to go for now. I was
Right.
never
Yeah. So y'all are still cool?
my ex.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. But that's not why we're not cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. We are no, we're not cool. But it's not because he's anti-sex worker. It's because I don't like him very much.
Right. You ain't even
Yeah,
got to go into it. I got you.
that's
Now,
all. Yeah,
two more things.
yeah.
One, my first one is a suggestion that I give to people, and I feel like I'm giving them like some good knowledge, and I'm pretty sure it's not. But since you're into the OnlyFans stuff, I be trying to tell people if you're into OnlyFans, you have your own OnlyFans. Foot fetish. People have foot fetish. I'm pretty sure that makes a lot of fucking money. So that would be my little jewel I give to you that you should, I mean, do a, oh, and I guess for the people listening and watching, if you want to give your OnlyFans, you can. If not, that's cool.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I'm not the most presentable version of myself, but my colleague and I make a lot of both single and coupled play content. A lot of girl on girl action, but there's some other stuff going on there too. If y'all are curious, go to onlyfans.com/honey period and period Henry. But Henry is spelt with an I, not a Y.
Right. Let
I
me
don't
see if
know
I
if
can.
that plug's even gonna work, but I'm
No,
gonna
it
put it
will. It,
up.
so there you go. That's how you spell Henry, but I'm trying to see if I can what is it? Oh, I can't do it. It's acting weird. So it's onlyfans.com/Henry
Honey.
period.
No,
Oh,
honey.
honey period and Period Henry.
Yep, Honey, period, and period Henry. Honey and Henry. But instead of spaces, you're gonna put some periods in there, kind of thing. Yeah.
How does OnlyFans, is that good? Is that pretty profitable?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
basically right now, I have three jobs. I run the Ishtar Collective with the rest of the collective members. That just became a paid position this year. I'm really excited about it.
Nice, nice. So
Yeah.
you're a step closer to you're kind of
Retiring.
making sex. You tell your grandkids I retired as a sex worker.
That's right. Putting the old hanging up the G string or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, so I run the collective with the collective. I'm not the only person who does that. I feel like it's
Mm,
really important to make that clear because I love everybody I work with and they do
right.
so much. I couldn't do it on my own. I
Shout out the
absolutely couldn't
collective.
do it on my own.
Is that what y'all call yourself? The collective?
Yeah, we are very much a collective. All of our
That's
decision
nice.
making is horizontal. We vote on our decisions. Nobody clears anything without the consent of the entire party.
Y'all are like the Voltron of sex workers.
Yeah.
That was just my little corny joke. Sorry.
No, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, so I do that. I make content with my co-star Halyard Honey. We do a lot of, fun scissory stuff and
Scissory.
yeah, we've done
Oh,
the
scissory.
yeah, and we've done the splashing thing, the food porn, we've done the cake smearing thing. We have a good time. It's a lot of
See,
fun.
now you just throw some feet up in there. You
Now
know what
we
I'm
just throw
saying?
feet in there. We do it all. Basically, go to our OnlyFans. We do it all. And then I also work at the local liquor store because I got to get my entertainment somewhere. I don't have cable, so I watch the drunks.
Who
Good time.
has cable? I think I'm the only person left in life that appreciates cable. Like I appreciate the fuck out of cable more than Netflix, Hulu, all that shit. I do. I love
Yeah.
cable.
Well, I mean, Hulu's turning into fucking cable anyway. You get infomercials for like protein shakes and like diet plans now in between your
And
episodes.
I love every second. I love commercials. I love it. I do. I fucking love commercials. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's see. So but when I was do y'all help out with abuse and stuff too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we
Yeah,
do.
like sexual abuse and
Mm-hmm.
because not everybody wants to be a sex worker, but they may have been in a situation.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct. So we work in alliance with other anti-trafficking organizations that have been established in Vermont longer.
Hmm.
We are the only explicitly pro sex work, if you want to call it that, organization in the state. But there are other organizations that work against domestic violence and human trafficking. So we collaborate with
Right.
them to provide legal protection, health resources, and again, emergency funding to people coming out of dangerous situations. We also work
Nice.
with harm reduction through Swap Behind Bars. Last summer, during the anti-police brutality encampment, a lot of the college students camping out at the park had moved into the living room of the local houseless population.
Hmm.
And a lot of the houseless and transient community, in Vermont, deals with substance use. So we showed up with Narcan, with pamphlets on how to treat someone who's overdosing. We showed up with resources for, rehab or recovery, however you want to phrase it, if people were interested in that. We
Yeah.
showed up with sharps containers. We showed up with clean needles, just trying to make sure that
Yeah.
people are safe because we're not really about, I don't ever want to walk through life on a high horse. I
Yeah.
don't. I think I have no business on one. Um, I and I'm not comfortable telling people what to do or how to navigate complicated situations like trauma, like substance abuse,
Right.
like sex work. I don't. And so it was really important when we started, the organization that we were absolutely not here to tell people how to conduct themselves, you know?
Mm.
So coming in and like sharing that harm reduction resource felt really good because all we were doing was like providing safety and options, you know,
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
and
And so letting people just be themselves,
yeah, like you are allowed to
but
be
cleanly.
here. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, you are allowed to be here. You are allowed to participate on the planet. You know, we all have that right by just like sheer force of will to live.
Yeah, I feel you. So I'm gonna have to wrap up,
Yeah.
but before we go,
Hmm.
I want you to, let me put the thing back on the screen. I want you to give your OnlyFans again, but to anybody who thinks negative about this, or just, I don't know, just what would your last words be to somebody who maybe would want to pursue this, or somebody who frowns upon this?
Sure. Um, well, if there's anyone thinking about entering the industry, OnlyFans is popping right now. I would say do your homework on sex worker history and how you
Mm,
can support the community that you're entering. I think that, when we come in, it's kind of, I guess it's important that we pay homage to the communities that teach us what we know,
right.
to the communities that create our history and our conduct around these things. So if you're about to enter sex work, I absolutely invite you to do it. It's a lot of fun. Know your boundaries, and like, don't be afraid to change your mind. Don't be afraid to say no, and take good care of those boundaries. Take good care of like your brain and your body, because it can be really exhausting if you don't come to understand your limitations, and no
Mm.
one's going to respect them until you create the environment of that respect. You have to command it. You
Come on,
cannot.
girl.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
You have to come in, you have to claim it, you have to own that shit.
Hmm.
And to folks who are, in a position against sex work, I would say shoot me an email. My email is Henry, Henri, at ishtarcollective.org. And if there are concerns that you would want to discuss with me, I would be more than happy to do that. Um,
Nice.
I would just encourage, if it's something that makes you feel squeamish and funny, maybe start internalizing that feeling, asking why, and then
Mm.
try to have a conversation with somebody who's in the industry and see if you can, change that perspective. See how you feel after that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you for being on here and opening up about this and educating me and the other listeners and viewers. I really do appreciate this.
No worries. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's good to see you again.
You too, man. What has been like a year and a half, maybe now?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe even two. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
been a minute.
probably.
Yeah, it's
Well, I'm happy you're good, and I want you to stay safe. And if y'all want to find her, it's onlyfans.com/honey.and.henry, and that's
mhm. Yep.
Henri.
Yep, and it's and. So AND.
Yes,
Honey
AND.
and
Yes.
Honey and Henry. Yeah.
All right,
Uh,
man. I guess I'm very intrigued with this, so I want you to keep me updated with what's going on, and maybe in a couple months get you back on here and see what type of progress we have in the sex work community.
that sounds wonderful. I look forward to more conversations with you soon.
Appreciate it, Moke and
All
friends.
right.
It is Moke and Henry. Have a good night.
Bye bye.
Rest in peace, Nipsey Hussle. Bye.